You're listening to the Sixers Beat with your host, Derek Bodner, right here on LibertyBallers.com and LibertyBroadcast.co.
Welcome, everybody. This is Derek Bodner here alongside Rich Hofmann on this week's Sixers Beat podcast, a part of the CLNS Media Network. Real quick before we begin, if you can, leave us a rating or a review, particularly on iTunes. It really helps us out, helps us get to more Sixers fans. You can get a link to that as well as other podcast apps over at SixersBeat.com. Also, this week's podcast brought to you by Harry's Razors. Great shave, half the price. Go to harrys.com/SixersBeat. Rich, I feel like we've been talking about this inevitable Jahlil Okafor trade for so long. Like, for years, it feels like years and years and years. I don't entirely know how to even react at this point.
How many times have we gotten into a long Okafor discussion?
Oh, God.
Only for us at the end, somebody to say, why are we spending so much time talking about this? Here's the good news, Derek. This is the last time we have to talk about it.
It is, at least until they play the Nets, which I'm sure at one point JoJo might force us to talk about it. It'll be interesting to see what kind of a role.
Did you see that? He said last night his message for Jahlil was, he said he texted him, "I love you, and I'm going to bust your ass 4 times a year."
Yeah. Those will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what kind of a role he plays and how many minutes they give him. I assume they're going to give him big minutes because the only reason you make a trade like that is to try him out and see if he can be a successful reclamation project. And those kind of guys don't usually turn it around unless you give him a chance. So he'll probably play a pretty decent role over there, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, it's one of the best landing spots for him, for sure. I think Phoenix and Chicago were sort of the other places that you thought in theory could be landing spots, but the Nets are essentially what the Sixers were a few years ago, except without their own pick, which is
a big part. But yeah.
That's a huge part of it. But as far as the day-to-day on-court operation, they're a slightly more dressed-up version of the Sixers team. And Kenny Atkinson is, he's basically in the same spot Brett is. He gets his team to play really hard every night. He seems very focused on player development. And for Ja and also for Nick Stauskas, I think it's a good landing spot for them. Now they're going to have to take advantage of it. And I think it's no secret that me and you and a whole host of other people who have watched the Philadelphia Sixers play basketball the last few years are a little skeptical of how or if Ja is going to be this breakout candidate that some people might think. But for them, I don't think they could have found a better spot.
Yeah, and I think that's probably about as much as I wanted to talk about Jahlil Okafor's upcoming play with the Brooklyn Nets. Moving on, when this trade happens, because I wrote about it today, it was probably before you left for the game, but you were preparing to go to your game. Where does your head go when this trade gets announced? Does it go to Trevor Booker? Does it go to giving up the second-round pick? Does it go to Jahlil Okafor? Where does it go?
More big picture stuff. I didn't think about Trevor Booker right away. We'll get to him in a little bit, but I just think when you follow somebody for 2 years and spend so much time thinking about him, and it was such a frustrating era, you sort of look back on, oh man, it's finally over. And I had so many conflicting feelings when I first heard what the trade package was. The first one was, oh my God, they had to give a second round pick to unload this guy. To, oh, Trevor Booker is actually kind of a useful player. He might be okay. And then it just turns into, oh man, I can't believe they waited this long to trade him. And then on the other hand, it's, oh, this is actually a pretty good deal. It's just, we spent so much time frustrated about Ja and his situation and his fit with the Sixers and, everything that's sort of what came to mind right away. And I think the main thing was like, I was kind of happy for him. He wasn't a bad spot. I don't think he's totally blameless for the bad spot that the Sixers have put him in. But the first thing I thought was, man, it's finally over. We don't have to worry about this guy anymore.
Yeah, I got a text from somebody like, why are you focusing on Okafor? He's probably the third most important part of this package behind a second-round pick and the Trevor Booker. And I think it's exactly because what you said. We've been talking about this guy for 2.5 years now. The Sixers invested a number 3 overall pick in him. There's been countless debates, nonstop, never-ending, agonizing, soul-crushing debates about this guy for 2.5 years. And it's natural for your head to immediately go there, even if, this was a guy who was, he played 25 minutes so far this year in 2 games. Like, he was not a part of the future or present at all. You knew they weren't going to get anything of value for him. So in reality, that second-round pick and Trevor Booker, they're both legitimately more important pieces for what's going to happen with this team. But we've just spent so much time focused on this guy and focused on the handling of this guy for it to finally come to a merciful resolution. Even if he's not the most important part of what's going on anymore, he's still very much going to be where your head is at.
I think I think it was Phil Jasner who once said this, that when somebody gets traded, you're supposed to look at who's coming back, not reflect on who's leaving. That's the best way to go about it, because you're covering the Sixers. It was just impossible to do this with Ja because of all the extra stuff that came with him. God, there were still debates about him to this day, even when, as you said, he's only played 20 something minutes this year. And it's a relief. Honestly, Colangelo was asked, I forget who asked the question, is it a relief that you finally got to trade him? And while he didn't come out and say that, he did mention that, yeah, it's nice that I won't have to be on the phones all the time trying to make the trade. And I get it.
Feel a little bit like a used car salesman at that point, right? No, his car's in really good shape. Trust me.
Yeah, exactly. And just as somebody who's covered him, it feels nice that I don't have to write about him, because we knew for such a long time now that he probably and then was definitely not going to be a long-term piece here. I think you put it a good way in your column. It was the end of an era.
Yeah, an era of many ways, right from the front office that drafted him and Hinkie and to the ownership group that had an increasing amount of pressure to make more immediate return moves on that front office, and right down to Colangelo, who should have traded him, in October or May of 2016 and not gone into that season with Noel and Embiid and Okafor and Holmes all trying to play and all trying to be showcased for an eventual, well, not all, but Noel and Okafor trying to be showcased. Just a comedy of errors. It is, it's great that it's over with. You wish it would have turned out pretty much almost any other way possible.
I know.
But, look, we got to move on and welcome Trevor Booker into the fold, which I think fans are going to like him. Not necessarily, I don't think fans are going to kid themselves into him being a major part of anything. He's very much going to be your 4th or 5th guy off the bench, but I think his style of play will endear himself well, at least.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans only know Trevor Booker from that crazy shot he hit a few years ago when he was playing with the Jazz, where he basically volleyballed the basketball over his head when there was 0.1 seconds left on the clock. I think that's the first place a lot of people look. Yeah, he's he's a tough guy. He is, I would put him very much in the sort of Amir Johnson role from from the intangibles that they bring. It'll be interesting to see if he plays. I asked Brett yesterday, are you actually going to play this guy? Because you have a lot of big guys when everybody's healthy, whether at the 4 or the 5. And as you wrote on The Athletic today, Booker is kind of vacillated between those two positions as the NBA has evolved. So I don't, and Brett basically said, yeah, at least initially it might be a little bit hard for him to play. So, really we're looking, this goes back to, oh man, you traded Ja for a guy who's not even going to play. It's a nice bit of insurance though. And for the Sixers purposes, obviously they were going to move on from Okafor this year. I feel more confident putting Trevor Booker in a game when they're desperate or when Joe is not playing a back-to-back, I feel way more confident putting him in a game than Ja. So,
for sure.
In that regards, it's a nice upgrade.
And look, they have whether or not there's the way I kind of viewed it is, basically they traded a second round pick for Booker. They needed Stauskas and Okafor to match the salary. And I think Booker is probably worth a second round pick. I think what they ended up trading the 2019 Knicks pick, which, we'll see what it ends up becoming. I think right now it's probably not as valuable as you would have thought it would have been 2 months ago, but there's also a lot of time between now and then for the Knicks to nix that up quite a bit. But, I think Booker's by and large worth a second round pick a year and a half from now. Like, I don't question that. I do question a little bit of fit for the same reasons you said. Another undersized big man 4-5 combo who really has a streaky to non-existent outside shot. Like, I know he's probably shot like 30% over the last 4 years, but it's so streaky that he's not spacing the floor. And you question, do you really need that in your rotation? Like, not even that do you need it, but will he be able to fit along with Holmes and Johnson and Bede and Simmons and Sharch? Like, there's a logjam there that I get. But I think one of the things, I still have 11 back-to-backs coming up. There's bound to be an injury at some point. And having a guy like Booker that you can turn to give you 15 to 20 minutes when that happens, it might be the difference between a win or two. And if it's the difference between a win or two in April, that could be really big. So I don't hate it. Like, I don't think this, basically, I think my overall stance on it is that in 3 years, this is probably a trade that moved the needle nowhere. Like, it probably didn't hurt the team, probably didn't help the team. It's probably a net neutral because odds of that second round pick working out, very low. Odds of Trevor Booker increasing their chance. And really, that's what I think is the end goal. Like, make the team slightly more enticing to a free agent so you can do something next summer. And the odds of Booker really materially changing that is low as well. So they're both low. It's probably going to end up being much ado about nothing. I like Booker. I'm just not entirely sold in his fit with these pieces.
What you talked about this, and I thought I'd like you to kind of expand on it a little bit. There are some fans who are a little, they just don't like the idea of giving up second round picks. And, when this whole process started, that was Sam's MO. He would just hoard those things. The point you made last night, I forget if it was on Twitter or somewhere else, but while that Knicks pick is valuable, it's less valuable to a team like the Sixers who have so many roster spots to fill. With the low value of a second round pick, and look, Jonah Bolden, he's a second round pick. We're all getting pretty excited about him. He's showing some stuff. But as soon as you hit on one of those guys, that takes up another roster spot you can't use for these picks. Right, for sure. So I just think where they're at, all those second round picks that Sam built up correctly, by the way, there becomes a logjam on the roster. It becomes hard to fit all of those guys in.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it wasn't just get second round picks and see which one of those work out. You have to get second round picks and have the playing time and the roster spots to play them. Otherwise, you'll never know whether or not they're going to work out. Just go back to the RTRS t-shirt where they printed out 100 names on the back of a t-shirt. Sixers can't cycle through 100 names right now. They just can't do that. So, I think what worked then, and the way I phrased it, you're always looking for, how to work the margins. How do you, take the situation you're in and find something that somebody else is not valuing appropriately. And for the Sixers, they were able to overvalue undrafted guys and second round picks because they had the playing time and the roster spots to give them a look because they didn't want to saddle their roster with, aging veterans or, quite frankly, that they didn't have stars on the roster either that would command 35 minutes a night and a lot of touches. Not that was a choice, but that was the reality of where they were. So I think right now you're not going to be able to cycle through as much. And look, like you said, this is a team, Luwawu Cabarrot, Korkmaz, Rashawn Holmes, Justin Anderson, still even young if you want to count him, Jonah Bolden, Pasechniks, and now 8 draft picks over the next 2 years. You're not going to keep all of them. You're not even going to be able to, stash them overseas. There's just a reality here. And would you like to, trade those for something other than a 5-month rental? Yeah, probably. But right now, the team didn't want to take on contract for next summer. And I guess when I look at one of these trades, I'm also, you're grading it on a curve because if they have these extra draft picks come June 2018, they're probably going to sell them. Or June 2019 in this case, because it's a 2019 pick. But we saw last year, they sold a 39th pick in the draft. That's a really good second round pick, and they still sold it. So, do I have real confidence that they're going to use it for a productive reason, like that they're going to combine second round picks or trade up or be able to get all draft and stash guys? I will give them credit. They've added 3 draft and stash. I'm including Korkmaz because they stashed him for a year, but they added 3 draft and stash guys over the course of 2 drafts. That's good. You're just not going to be able to do that with everyone. So it's all right. It's whatever. It's like I said, it's probably pointless either way.
When you ran through all of those names of the young players on the roster, my thought was, what would have been a little more valuable if they got the equivalent of Trevor Booker, who was a wing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
The positional value didn't work there. I also thought Mike O'Connor, our colleague at The Athletic, had a good take on the whole thing. I thought he put it pretty well. The Sixers are not responsible for plummeting Okafor's value.
Yes.
They are responsible for failing to recognize when it was at its apex.
Right. And look, Colangelo made it a point yesterday, hey, we had something at the deadline last year. That's great. But what else? Okay, so that fell through. What else did you have that you turned down over the last 18 months too? It's not just because that one deal fell through doesn't mean that you correctly predicted how his trade value would evolve over the course of the next year and a half. I'll never forget 2 things I'll never forget in this regard, and then we can move on. I'll never forget his "I will not make a bad deal." You did. And the Woj, starting asking price of 2 first-round picks. You got to be kidding me. I can't help but wonder what trades they turned down over the last 18 months. But whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's a bad trade. They and they didn't take on long-term money, which is obviously it's a very obvious part of this, but it's important too. They weren't going to add a player who added salary the next 2 years, and Booker is that. And I think we can probably close the door on the Jahlil Okafor era. Is there anything else?
No, I'm so out on talking about that guy's basketball ability. I'm glad he's got a chance to go play. Good luck, buddy. Good luck.
By the way, Nets Daily said Sean Marks has turned them into crime reporters because this was a robbery, I think was the tweet.
Yeah, I think it was Chris Mannix talking about, how they're creatively finding, how creative do you have to be to find a guy that they're begging to give away? There was nothing really creative about trading for Jahlil Okafor. But hey, look, they have playing time and touches available, so give it a shot. But it's not this master stroke of creative genius to be hey, that guy you're trying to give away, we'll take him.
Yeah, it's from their perspective, it's fine. If they want to take a shot, they're a team that's in position to do that. But this was not the D'Angelo Russell trade. Put it that way.
All right. So moving on. Rich, why is everybody on the team seemingly rebounding, playing transition defense like Jahlil Okafor?
It's been pretty concerning. You try to balance whether this is an 82 game schedule and young teams are going to go through their ups and downs. But man, these last 2 games really fucking suck, dude. They didn't give a shit in the first half of either of those games. Those are 2. All of the goodwill they built in getting to 13-9 against the toughest schedule in the league, against a road heavy slate. You don't want to say they gave it all back by losing to the Suns and Lakers at home, but they came pretty close. And it's like you said, I rewatched that Lakers game last night. Their transition defense was just abysmal. And it said at the end of the night that the Lakers only had 11 fast break points, but there were plenty of times they were able to get great shots in the half court because the Sixers were in scramble mode and they had a cross match that was favorable just because they didn't get back on defense. I mean, God, after the Sixers had dunks, the Lakers were running the ball back down the floor and getting good shots. And we have been, we've talked about Lonzo Ball a little bit here. The thing I will give him credit for last night, he did a great job of pushing pace, while at the same time, the Sixers did a terrible job of stopping the ball. There were a couple times Lonzo went right down the freaking lane. And that's, whether you want to blame that on scheme or I think it's mostly effort, and it's just not good enough. They, and you saw it on the last play. The, Embiid has a post up, and Embiid, by the way, was great in the second half of last night. He, on both ends of the floor, he picked it up, and that was encouraging to see, because I would really be shitting on the Sixers right now if that second half didn't turn out the way it did. So he loses the ball. It's unfortunate. I don't know whether he just dropped it or missed a layup, but the ball falls into Lonzo's hands and he sprints it down the court, and the Sixers get confused, which leads to Embiid closing out on him, Lonzo driving and kicking to Ingram, and Ingram being wide open. So the Sixers, I was happy that a lot of people didn't spin that as, oh man, they struggled again in the late game last night.
No,
they didn't struggle in the late game.
Right.
They came back and did a really good job for the most part in the fourth quarter. But they played like dog shit in the first 2.5 quarters, and they weren't perfect down the stretch. And when you play like that for half the game, even against a bad team, guess what? You deserve to lose.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The blowing failing to execute late is something that I thought some people would run with. And I heard some callers, Sports Talk Radio, be like, oh, Brett doesn't execute late in the game. No, last night was very much about the first 2.5 quarters, like you said. And over this 2-game stretch with the Lakers and the Suns, Suns came in 8-16, Lakers, I think, 8-15. Sixers have given up 23 points per game off of turnovers, third worst in the league over the last two games. They've given up 21 points per game on second chance points, which is tied for the worst in the league. And they're giving up, 49 points per game in the paint, which is 7th worst in the league. It's just all of the things they did well, and rebounding was one of their, not that they've ever stopped teams. Like they always turn the ball over, but rebounding was one of their real strengths, and their transition defense and their rebounding has just been dog shit the last 2 games. And yeah, they're not shooting the ball, and they kind of caught fire late and made the score closer. And look, a lot of their success is going to be predicated on whether or not those perimeter shots go in or not. And that's been a big part of their struggles. But they're not defending in transition. They're not communicating at all. And their rebounding has been awful. And it's come back to bite them against 2 teams that they had no real business losing to.
I think I read somewhere yesterday, believe it was John Schumann of NBA.com, that while the Sixers are, I don't know if they're first now, probably after last night they might have flipped with the Lakers, but they were 29th and the Lakers were 30th in turnovers. And his point was, yeah, that's bad, but the good news for the Sixers is they're not giving up that many live ball turnovers, which is what ends up hurting you on the other end of the floor more than just throwing the ball into the 5th row like Joel Embiid does sometimes. There's been a lot of live ball turnovers the last couple of nights, and it's been, God, JJ Redick was just, some of the decisions he made last night were just brutal, just losing the ball. Simmons, you could tell, I mean, he had that killer play at the end of the 3rd quarter where Kentavious Caldwell-Pope knew it was coming. He knew that he wanted to throw the ball back to Embiid for 3 instead of pulling up and taking the jump shot. And that came to bite him. And yeah, it's just a lot of sloppy mental mistakes. In rewatching those games, I have to say last night's first 2 quarters bothered me even more than the Phoenix game.
Yep.
Because the Phoenix game, while that was aggravating to watch live, Devin Booker, some of the shots he hit were just ridiculous. There's something that you just can't, at some point you have to, as Brett says, you have to shake his hand,
right,
and just go. And also the Sixers shot terribly that night too. Last night, God, I mean, you mentioned the rebounding too. Some of those offensive rebounds were killers. And God, think about all the mistakes we're talking about. That ended up being a 1-possession game. And that should be really frustrating to the Sixers because, I mean, they really blew a chance to get 2 easy wins this week.
Yeah, we were all expecting 15-11. Now you're 15-10. Now you're 13-11. Not how I think anybody drew that out. You're right. That play with Simmons and Embiid to end the third quarter, that was one of the most mind-boggling end of quarter situations I've maybe ever seen. It was when the other team knows that your 6'10", 250-pound point guard isn't going to attempt a shot 7 feet from the basket, and he can overplay the passers. Ben doesn't look entirely himself lately. He had a couple of great drives in the first half, so I'll give him credit for that. But then Redick, I mean, just the worst. I mean, he might have been the worst player on the floor last night. And that is not, look, a lot of people are going to kill him for it. Shooters are going to be up and down. He's going to have days where he hits and when he misses. But it was more the decision-making that really drove, I think, everybody insane last night. And he deserves to be called out. That was a bad game. I still like JJ Redick. I think he's going to help this team throughout the season, but I'm not going to tell you not to be frustrated over what was a brutal performance. That was a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah. Have some perspective. Don't write him off. He's going to have nights where he's going to flat out win the game for the Sixers. He's already had a couple of those, but yeah, I mean, how frustrating and it was him and Bayless. God, some of the fouls they committed in the fourth quarter too. Yep. Come on, guys, you're supposed to be veterans. And they, for whatever reason, just didn't bring it mentally last night. And I understand why people get frustrated about that because those guys were two of the main culprits for sure.
I mean, Bayless has kind of had that problem all season, which is he frustrates me a million times more than Redick does.
He also got the technical foul the other night too. It just seems like he just gets too angry.
Yeah, that plausible. He's especially frustrating because they have to get rid of that contract, and with the way he's playing, that's not going to be easy. All right. I don't know how much more I can. You got any other main takeaways from those dreadful performances?
Yeah, I mean, on a positive note, Joe was great the second half last night. Yeah, he played. I was focused on him coming into the game last night because I think the natural question for him is how do you follow up whatever he had? What was it? 47, 15, 7, and 7, something like that. How do you actually follow that up? Because, even if the Lakers didn't play him any differently, it was going to be really hard for him to have that type of effect. And I liked what he did. They sent a couple more double teams. They dug down a little bit from the top. Sometimes they played him with straight single coverage, and they definitely mixed up the players playing him. Yeah. I think it was Bogut for a little while. They had a good. I thought Joe got away with a couple pushes. Bogut got away with an egregious flop. That was kind of fun to watch. Who else did they have on him? They had Lopez. They had Julius Randle, and Larry Nance got some possessions too. He did a really good job, and I thought, especially down the stretch too, he made a couple of great passes to Richaun Holmes. Just read the defense perfectly and dropped it in. And I guess that's a question for you. What'd you make of Richaun's game last night? Because he has not been playing much at all over the past couple of weeks. Amir has taken that backup center job for a few weeks, and Brett has always mentioned that he's not forgetting about Richaun. Richaun played really well last night. He was active. He had a couple of absolutely nasty dunks, but it came as the 4-man playing with Embiid for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, Richaun had played about 35 minutes over the last 7 or so games, so he was very much out of the rotation. It, like you said, it came mostly as a 4-man, which is something Brett has been pretty clear he doesn't necessarily want to use all that often. Obviously, with Dario out and against a team that plays some big guys, that gave him a little bit more of an opportunity to get him in there. Look, I have been very critical of Richaun's defense. I have also said that while I think, I understand why Brett turns to Amir Johnson in a season where he's expected to win. Like, you can just trust Amir to be in the right spots defensively. And I think coaches really value that. With Richaun, you really have no idea how focused he's going to be on that end of the court. So I kind of get why Brett does, why Brett leans on Amir like that. But from my perspective, as much as I get excited talking about the playoffs, and as much as I want to see them, really push for a decent enough seed where they could be competitive in the first round, development is still very big. And I'd like to see what Rashawn can develop into. I'm not completely out on him. As much as I am concerned about his defense, I'm not out on him at all. Like, I like his offense is very obviously valuable. And the way he has he made that one play where he, darted across the lane, jumped in the air, caught the ball, and laid it up in one motion. And that's just a series of events with the athleticism and the coordination and the body control and the touch that very few big men his size can make. And he has such gravity because everybody knows how much of a threat he is, rolling and driving and diving to the basket, that, I think he does open things up. I think he'd be a great spark off the bench offensively. But man, I'd like to see him a more regular part, whether that's playing alongside of Embiid for a couple minutes a night, whether that's playing a few more of Amir's minutes. I'd like to see him more regular, just to see if he has a game like last night where, like, that dude looked like he was shot out of cannon. Like, he came in and he was instant energy and instant aggression. If he has a night like that, leave him out there. If he looks like if he's having an off night, then maybe go to Amir. I'm not sure if I like the Embiid Holmes combination too much going forward. Like, I'm fine giving it some minutes here and there to see if it can continue to work. But I definitely do know that I want to see a little more of Amir overall. And if that's the way you got to do it, then by gosh, go ahead and do it.
Agreed on all counts. Being shot out of a cannon, his energy was fantastic last night. That was a dead crowd for the most part, and it was a packed house too. It was, before the fourth quarter, it was pretty quiet, but once they showed LeVar and Rashawn really started getting things going, it became a really fun atmosphere. The thing that Rashawn does, he had the one play, and obviously he had the great dunk in the first half, and that crazy layup you said that you talked about. The one play that sticks out to me, I think he might be better at this than anybody in the NBA. If he has the ball below his knees and there are 4 players in the lane yes. on the other team reaching for the ball, I don't think there is anybody in the NBA better than Rashawn Holmes at somehow getting that ball up on the rim. It's unbelievable how he does it. The Lakers had 4 dudes swiping for that basketball, and he had it basically between his legs. And it just, you said, all right, this is going to take a little longer than usual, but only 2 seconds for me to just lay it in. So he's great at that. I also agree with your point that, and Brett's point, in general, I don't like playing 2 traditional bigs. And when I mean traditional, Rashawn, I know he can knock down a 3 once in a while, but he's much more effective diving to the rim. Also, I don't really like watching him shoot the ball that much either. Too. Him and Amir might have the 2 grossest looking jumper. I mean, they're top 5% percentile of worst three-point shots in the league in terms of looks. Like, they're just brutal to watch. I am a little curious to see him and Embiid though, because the idea of Rashawn being a weak side cutter off an Embiid post up, to me, that's interesting. Because it's such a simpler read for JoJo to make. Instead of having to thread the needle across the floor, he's going to have a guy who basically the defense is going to have to account for, or he can just throw a simple lob pass and Rashawn will dunk it. That's something that interests me. But yeah, like you said, for all the reasons that Brett has played Amir, I agree with them to an extent. But look, Rashawn has another year on his contract too. He has more of a runway, as Colangelo said. And he has potential too. He needs to play. You can't completely forget about him, even if I totally understand that his defense is a little unreliable at the 5.
Yeah, I mean, he's that combination, the Embiid Holmes combination. They'd played 5 minutes all season together, leading up to that game last night. So I think it's something people ask me, like, whether Brett's going to do it more now or whether Brett's come around to using that. I don't think necessarily Brett came around. I think his hand was kind of forced, but does maybe he reevaluate it a little bit now that it had so much success last night? Maybe. Like, that might be. Rashawn's always a tough guy for me because, on the one hand, like I said, I think his offensive contributions are are pretty real. And for a backup big, I think that would be a real asset. And I like him because he seems like, he plays hard. He gives a shit defensively. I think that's great, but the defense has just never been there. And I think because of that, because I like his offense and I like his effort and I like his athleticism, that he confuses me a lot. And I always think he should be better than he is defensively. And I always get frustrated that he's not reaching that and reaching his potential. But by the same token, he's young. I say he's young enough, but he's like 23 at this point or something like that. But he's still young enough and with enough potential. And like you said, you have another year on his contract that even if maybe Amir gives you a better chance to win right now, and I can understand why Brett makes that decision, I would still lean towards Holmes just because of what he could develop into, and because the drop-off, even if it is there, is probably not quite as steep. Like you're making offense-defense trade. It's tough because, right, we've complained about the defensive drop-off from Embiid when he goes to the bench for quite a while. And finally, Amir Johnson is giving you a little bit defensively. But at the same token, like nobody on the bench is giving you anything offensively either. So the bench is so imbalanced that you can make a case either way. Right now, I just like to see Amir play just to see if he could ever put it together.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, Rashawn play just to see if he could ever put it together.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, the mentality, it feels like there should be something better, but sometimes...
Gosh, he should be a good defender. He's the one. I can, like... It became real obvious that Jahlil Okafor is just not, looping back to the start of this podcast, it became obvious real quickly to me that Jahlil Okafor was never going to be a good NBA defender or even an average NBA defender because the combination of awareness and shit giving and athleticism just isn't there. Well, shit, Rashawn Holmes has 2 of those 3 attributes in spades. If he can ever just figure out that third one, he'll be okay.
Yep. I'm trying to think. Was there anything else that was a big positive from last night? I can't really think of anything.
Cove played a little better. TJ's back, but he didn't have a TJ-like game.
No, he certainly didn't. It is good to see him back. Obviously, the bench is hurt. I mean, as much as we are sort of skeptical about what Dario and the starting lineup and are a little unsure about what his fit is, God, you take that guy out of the lineup, the bench units become a little dicier. And I mean, that's what happened last night. TLC is not playing well at all right now.
No, TLC was awful the other night. He is like, I want to keep hope alive. I really do. Because he's still only a second-year player. He picked up the game kind of late. He was a late bloomer. But he's also, again, he's like 22 or 23 at this point. And he just, I mean, like I wrote the other day, he's a 3-and-D player that really has no idea how to play D and can't have a consistent 3. And it's been a little tough to navigate right now, especially when they're giving him 25 minutes a night with Anderson out and no real bench depth beside him. He needs to play. And again, a lot of times you want to play young kids because maybe they'll develop a little bit quicker. He needs to play less. He's being asked for way too much right now.
Poor Max.
Yeah. But, I mean, people will also be like, well, why is Brett playing him? Well, look at the other options. There's nobody. There's nobody.
Yeah, I would hope that when Justin Anderson returns from his shin splints, that he will get a good hard look in that TLC spot. But yeah, right now, I mean, the only other solution is Korkmaz, and I'm not sure they want to play him yet. I don't think, it's questionable. I mean, his skill set does fit as far as the 3-point shooting, but it's clear that they don't think he's quite ready yet, and he is getting time on I-95 driving to Delaware every day. They should, by the way, those press releases are too long. They just need... The Sixers press releases just need to be as long as your tweets about with Korkmaz, because I think he's definitely on pace to surpass Lorenzo Brown if he hasn't already. It should just say Furkan gone or Furkan back. That's a good question. Somebody has to look that up, see whether or not he's been sent down more than Brown. I truthfully don't know. I kind of I didn't pay quite as much attention when Brown got sent up and down because I didn't care. But Korkmaz, it's an everyday thing at this point. Those press releases, I think are I actually have it pinned right now, the line that they have about when he was drafted and when he was signed, because it is they include the exact same thing every time,
And then after that, the next sentence is always how many games he's appeared in this year, but it's always, Korkmaz was signed by the Sixers on July 4th, 2017, after originally being selected by Philadelphia with the 26th overall pick in the 2016 NBA draft. Like, that's in every one of those press releases. And it's like, guys, we get it. We all know when he was drafted. We all know when he was signed. Like you said, a little more streamlined. I get it's all copy and paste at this point, but just Furkan back, Furkan and Delaware. It's all I need. It's all I need.
It feels like the newspaper stories when it's just they're basically only announcing news, whether it's a transaction or a player being hurt, and then to just add on to the news that you're writing about, you post his bio. Right. You basically write he averaged 12 points a game in 70 games last year or something like that, where it's really all that you needed to write was this guy got traded or this guy's going to be out for the rest of the year.
All right. Here's a question. Which comes first? Ben Simmons attempts a real legitimate three-pointer, or Furkan Korkmaz gets real NBA minutes?
I'm going to say Ben Simmons attempts a three-pointer. I just feel like at the end of the clock, he's going to have to throw one up at some point here. Does that count?
I don't know. I think so. We're not talking like a half-court heave. We're talking like a corner three that time ran out for.
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
It would be a heave. It would be a regular three-point shot, but it would be one where a teammate throws him a grenade at the end of the shot clock.
Huh. I guess that counts.
So that's the only way I see it happening. I clearly don't think next game we're going to see Embiid set a screen and Ben take one dribble and pull a
right.
Damian Lillard off the screen and just bomb one from three. That's not happening. I think he'll probably take one before Furkan gets some minutes, but it's not going to be something that he wants to do for sure.
I'm going to go with Furkan because I think, we're right now one injury away from Korkmaz almost being like from Brown almost having to play Korkmaz. I don't think we're one injury away from Ben Simmons taking a three-pointer. So I'm going with the Turk.
Fair enough.
All right. I'm not sure I necessarily have anything else. It's I think if you go listen, I haven't listened to Spike's little podcast, but I'm sure they're having a much bigger celebration about Okafor being gone. I don't necessarily feel like spending an hour talking about Jahlil Okafor, which is probably why we didn't do an emergency podcast last night. Also, we had jobs to do, and we actually cover the team professionally, unlike some other podcast hosts. But it's I can't muster too much. Even if it's nice to see the era or the error over, I can't muster too much. I've spent 2.5 years talking about a guy whose only real relevance is that he was selected over Kristaps Porzingis.
Yep, he could be a good trivia question one day. What do you think about the next three games?
They've got a bunch of. Hold on, let me pull up the schedule. I think they've got like
the
9 of their next 12 on the road or something like that, right?
Yeah, the next three I believe are. First off, what do you think? Back to back coming up, Cleveland and New Orleans, Saturday, Sunday.
So do you think? Because I'm sure if that's a good question actually. I wonder which game Joel would prefer to play in if they gave him the option. Like you would think by default, Joel, not the team, Joel would prefer the Cavs because who wants to play against? Like who wouldn't want to play against LeBron? But on the same time, you've got Boogie over on the Pelicans, and we all know how that works out with Joel. So that would be interesting. Something tells me, and this is I'm purely speculating here, so don't read anything into it. But something tells me that they might try to play him against the Pelicans, if for no other reason than they have a better chance of winning that game. But it'll be interesting what they end up deciding upon. Also, should have mentioned this early. For context, we're recording this on Friday evening. So if a press release comes out about Markelle Fultz and an update on that, we're recording this before that happens. So.
Yeah, there's a day off on either side too, so I don't really see a major rest benefit one way or another. I'm not sure I agree too. He might want to play against the Pelicans too because he relishes these one-on-one center matchups, and the Pelicans have two. If I were the Sixers and the rest there wasn't a medical benefit to playing him against Cleveland, to me, it's pretty clear. You should play him against New Orleans.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It was just, like you said, it's interesting from Joe's perspective because I do agree he likes playing against those high-profile center matchups, but there's also a little extra boost for LeBron, and maybe even a little extra boost because they played so poorly against Cleveland last time. He might want to try to avenge that poor game. We'll see. But my gut definitely tells you that he's going to play against the Pelicans. But it'll be interesting. That's a tough 3-game stretch, though. Like, I think 1 and 2 in that stretch would be somewhat of a win. Like,
yeah.
Cleveland, to me, obviously seems like that would be an astronomical win if they can pull that one off. And the Timberwolves are playing much better of late, too. So that 3 kind of tough games here. 3 kind of tough games.
Which is why those 2 terrible losses stick out even more. It's not like they have a safe landing spot.
Can you imagine? I mean, if they go 1 and 2, they would have lost 4 of 5. City will not be in love with that record. Not be in love with that record.
I agree with you, though. In a vacuum, put those 2 stinkers in the past. If you can play semi-competitive in these 3 games and get 1 of 3 of them, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, because after that, you have the Thunder, the Bulls, and the Kings, which, look, the Thunder are still talented, even if they're not playing all that well. Bulls and the Kings should be 2 games you could win, although, of course, we know just because you're playing the Kings doesn't mean you're going to pull out that win. So there is a chance that after this little 3-game road trip, they can come back and kind of get things back on track before they have to go on their next road trip. But it would be great to get 2 out of these 3, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough.
God, there were so many times in November when we'd be leaving the arena and I'd ask you, when the hell are they playing the Bulls again? Like, when do those games come up? So it's definitely good to see some of the bottom feeders on the schedule. But yeah, this is, I mean, they put themselves in a tough spot here, and if they're not careful, they'll lose 5 in a row pretty easily here.
I felt much better about looking forward to the bottom feeders when they weren't coming off losses to the Suns and the Lakers. So, all right.
With the Kings loss also there,
yeah,
too.
They're now 5-3 against teams below 500, which is not great, especially considering that 3 days ago they were 5-1. But anyway, thank you for jumping on, Rich. We'll talk to you soon, and have a good one.
All right, man. I'll see you.
You've been listening to the Sixers Beat right here on LibertyBallers.com and LibertyBroadcast.co.
My mic check is life or death, breathing a sniper's breath. I exhale the yellow smoke of Buddha through righteous steps, deep like the shining, sparkle like